Clover being a D is an amazing reveal and explains why we never got to directly see his death. Oda was hiding his smile. We're gonna talk about Clover's name because it is some pretty wild stuff. But first there's another thing. While we never actually saw Clover's death, we did see his final moments where the scholars were yelling. The tree of knowledge was about to fall, presumably to crush them all to death. Clover's final moments are very sad. This is not a smiley D-man, which is especially noticeable now because the panel at the very top of this page is shocked Assault being frozen, giving the will of D smile. There's a theory as to why this is. Theory number 1, Clover was not intended to be a D clan member, and this is an Oda direction that is always possible. But theory number 2 is that Clover didn't die this way because he wasn't open about his D. He denied his heritage and even publicly severed his connection to his brother, so he may not have received the privilege of a D smile upon death. One reason why those with the will of D smile in the face of death is because they know that they're going to die with no regrets. They either already accomplished what they set out to do, or they didn't, but they lived the way they wanted to. Clover didn't really do either. Looking back on this panel of Clover, I can't help but compare it to Nefertari de Cobra, who faced a very similar situation. After Luffy beat Crocodile, the alabaster tomb was crumbling down. Cobra accepted his fate with a smile, a will of D smile, having no regrets, knowing that Alabaster was now free of Crocodile. Now let's get to Clover's name, because there's a bit of a translation dispute here, one that we really need the official version to clear up. In Japanese, the name is Kirao de Kuroba, and in response to this, fans have decided to translate his name as Clive or Cleve, though different Irish dialects seem to disagree on that. In case you're wondering how this connection was made, this impossible Irish word cursed my confusing Gaelic heritage. In Japanese, it is actually pronounced as Kurau, the same way that Clover's name is spelled in Japanese. But it's also disputed because a much simpler translation would be the English word cloud, similar to how Gold D. Roger is known as Gold Roger. So in this case, Kirill de Clover would be Cloud Clover. It's not a terrible idea because Iron Cloud, Sky Dawn, Freedom, etc., it all works thematically. However, the Irish name holds some pretty extraordinary connections. The cleave is the sword of light that appears in many Gaelic folktales, most commonly in one of the hero on a mission to seek the One Story, which is kind of like what we're doing in One Piece, not only seeking the titular One Piece, but also the missing story of the world. Now to be fair, the Irish folktale goes a bit weird from here because then it turns into a tale of a dude becoming a werewolf because his wife cheated on him. Although allegedly the Sword of Light isn't involved at that point. But to bring up another mythical Irish weapon, I'd like to offer the Spear Gay Bulk, which I know not because of my Irish heritage, but because of Lancer from the Fate franchise. This is a very shaky connection at this point, but consider this. The sun god Nika, in the only depiction we know of him, is carrying a sword and a spear. How insanely appropriate would it be if that sword was the Sword of Light? Given that we've gone full Irish at that point, let's give Nika another mythical Irish weapon as well. Again, shaky connection, and all of this might be pointless speculation if the official translates his name as Clough or Cloud or something else. Clovers are pretty damn Irish, and so I'm liking the idea of giving that theme to Professor Clover, at the very least, as well as enjoying Oda's relentless expansion into mythology across the planet. Maybe Joy Boy's entire crew consisted of people inspired by myths, one of them being Emd, who we've already covered, the golem of Jewish mythology. Meanwhile, Zunisha calls on Hindu cosmology with the idea that civilization is being held up on the back of elephants. Nefertari Lily could obviously be a take from Egyptian mythology, and so on and so forth. This whole Clover revelation really makes you wonder how many more hidden discs there are. There could be a lot of them, many of them people who we've already met, people who, like Trafalgar D. Water Law, were told to keep their secrets hidden and actually did it. Most of the discs we know about are either confident or stupid enough to proudly proclaim it in public. They should have been hiding them like Clover was because of the D Purge. Speaking of this, it could be why Garp joined the Marines to save his son and grandson from this purge of the D. That's the sort of action that I think could completely redeem Garp from any wrongdoing in my mind despite the unfortunate Ace incident. We know that Garp values family more than duty, and that there is a method to him acting as one of the world government's greatest assets. He's about 20 years younger than Clover would be, so this prejudice could have extended well into his childhood and adulthood. Perhaps Garp made it his mission to protect those with the D in their names by proving to the world that there was nothing to fear. In fact, a D could go on to become the planet's greatest hero, which is also why he was so obsessed with Luffy and Ace becoming Marines to change the perception of the D name and wash the stigma away. The term would be to assimilate the D wielders into greater society, which would be an interesting take on the will of D. It would add a lot of tension to Garp's relationship with Dragon, who has almost single-handedly undone all of his work by becoming known as the world's worst criminal. I get why she did it, but I don't think Atlas punching Lilith was entirely necessary, mate. It was absolutely necessary. Atlas is the aspect of violence, that's just how she gets things done. In the chapter, I mentioned that it was probably her plan to blow herself up to push the 1000 Sunny even if Ethan wasn't there. Atlas saw a problem to be solved, so she came up with the most effective solution that violence could offer. Given how much Atlas resembles her, I love how Ginny sacrificed herself again for the sake of Bonnie. What a depressingly sweet thing to say. I'd honestly forgotten about this, but Atlas and Ginny do look pretty alike, especially when you compare Atlas to young child Ginny. It's not just the hair, which I should say is not a common cut. Something weird is definitely going on here. The faces also start to match up quite a bit. Atlas is almost like a tribute to Ginny, which sounds odd at first because Atlas is Vegapunk's clone. Then you need to start asking questions like, how would Vegapunk even know about Ginny? Even if he did, why this? Vegapunk convinced Kuma to participate in his memory experiment, so Vegapunk almost certainly does know about Ginny, or did because of the whole death thing. Also, he knew that Kuma's most pleasant memories were when he escaped with Ginny and they lived together as children. Still, the leap is a bit weird, Vegapunk cloning himself and making one of those clones Bartholomew Kuma's childhood love seems off. There's something that doesn't quite track to me. It might be like the failsafe he programmed into the other Pachifeaster, another line of defense for Bonnie if she ever truly needed it. This could be why Atlas is the aspect of violence, someone who would not hesitate to punch and fight for Bonnie's sake. Although even then, Atlas here has done the wrong thing because leaving the giant warrior pirate ship has now put both Kuma and Bonnie in danger of being killed by Saturn. This might be where Kuma makes his one final sacrifice, because the only thing capable of getting him to move seems to be whenever Bonnie is threatened by Saint Saturn. But with Atlas, I'm not so sure. There is a definite resemblance to Ginny there. It's on purpose. I just don't have a solid reason to lean on. Liam, we could really use a recap of what happened to each of the Vegapunks. What a magnificent idea. Shaka got shot, Pythagoras went boom, Stella got stabbed, Atlas also went boom, Lilith went to sleep, and as for York, this little piggy went wee-wee all the way back to Marijoa to take up the full-time occupation of being the worst person ever. However, that recap is missing a certain Edison. I'm not entirely thrilled with the status of Edison at the moment, because Oda has left it even more frustratingly vague than usual. Last time we saw him, he was collapsing against a wall in chapter 1116. The next update we have is York confirming that he's been cut off from punk records, thus implying his death. Or at least that's York's conclusion. But going by the rules of One Piece, I think we need to assume that Edison is still alive until someone flat out states that he's dead or Oda shows his death. Just being disconnected from punk records isn't quite good enough for me. I would be incredibly dissatisfied if it turns out that Edison was dead, but I don't think that Oda would do that. He hasn't shied away at all from showcasing each of the Vegapunks dying in very visceral ways, so I have no reason to believe that he would off-screen Edison. That might be the case where Edison comes back online and immediately calls an update to reveal that he isn't, in fact, dead.